Good morning. On March 18, 2025, Israel resumed its military operations in the Gaza Strip, launching widespread airstrikes that resulted in over 400 casualties, including many children. This escalation effectively ended a two-month ceasefire that had provided a fragile respite for the region's 2.3 million residents amid an ongoing humanitarian crisis. The situation has worsened significantly since Israel blocked humanitarian aid on March 2nd, exacerbating the already dire conditions, with both sides accusing each other of violating the ceasefire. The question remains: what steps can be taken to restore peace and address the humanitarian needs of those affected? Welcome to In Depth. The ongoing Israeli war on Gaza has resulted in over 400 Palestinian deaths within just 10 hours of renewed Israeli airstrikes, raising alarm over civilian casualties. According to The Guardian, while Israel claims its strike targets Hamas leaders, the risk of civilian deaths is substantial, with previous reports indicating over 49,000 fatalities in Gaza, 59% of whom are civilians. Experts question Israel's adherence to international humanitarian laws, emphasizing the principles of distinction and proportionality that aim to protect civilians. Notably, incidents like the Jabalia refugee camp attack highlight the severe impact on civilians. In Gaza, doctors are witnessing scenes of Armageddon as they struggle to cope with the aftermath of intense Israeli airstrikes, which have killed over 400 people in a single day, primarily women and children. The Independent stated that this escalation follows a two-week blockade that severely hampered emergency medical responses, leaving hospitals without essential supplies. Emergency rooms, overwhelmed with casualties, are filled with patients, many suffering from severe injuries. The renewed violence occurring during Ramadan, igniting fears of a prolonged conflict amidst ongoing political tensions within Israel, and highlights the dire humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The ongoing Israeli bombardment in Gaza has led to rising casualties and mass displacement. As aid efforts are severely hampered and the brutal war resumed, the humanitarian crisis deepens.
The recent Israeli airstrikes on Gaza have escalated the humanitarian disaster after Israel resumed its aggression and defied the ceasefire, with more than 400 people killed in just one day, bringing the death toll to nearly 49,000 since the war began in 2023. The vast majority of casualties are women and children. Hospitals are overwhelmed, with casualties transported by donkey carts due to fuel shortages. The Israeli military continues to block all humanitarian aid from entering Gaza, severely restricting food, medical supplies, and fuel, with no electricity that was cut by Israel and limited access to clean water. Residents face dire conditions. Thousands more Palestinians are displaced, forced to flee their homes once again. The international community has condemned the resumption of the Israel war on Gaza and called for a halt to the aggression. But the Israeli military's actions show no signs of abating. The situation is becoming increasingly desperate, with Gaza's already crumbling infrastructure further deteriorating. The current crisis in Gaza seems to be severe enough that without immediate relief and intervention from the international community, Gaza will face a full-scale humanitarian collapse.
Right, welcome back, and for more analysis we are joined by Ms. Ratiba Al-Nitsha, a member of the Palestinian Action Committee from the occupied Jerusalem. Good morning to you, Mrs. Nitsha, and welcome to Q News. Let me here start by asking you about what are the stated objectives, do you think, from your point of view, of Israel's military operation, and how do they differ from previous campaigns?
There's two main goals or aims for these attacks in Gaza. The first one is the inside or the internal situation in Israel, the escalation of strikes against Netanyahu decisions in attacking the state of Israel, especially when he decided to fire out Ronen Barak from Shabak, and now he's planning even to fire the judge, counselor judge from as well in Sunday, and all of these internal issues of passing the budget in Israel, voting for the budget in few days, and he didn't has a majority to pass these budgets, so he needed to enter Ben Gvir, and Ben Gvir put like 3 conditions for entering the government again, and that one of those was to return attacks on Gaza Strip. In the other side, they are trying to say that these attacks is to put pressure on Hamas to accept a Witkoff proposal in releasing the Israeli prisoners from Gaza for 50 days of ceasefire, and that's all because Netanyahu from minute one he is running out from the second period of these
The ceasefire agreement
of ceasefire, yes, the ceasefire agreement,
the second phase,
and he is trying not to reach the second phase with the political points in it, which means ending the war on Gaza Strip. He still wants to occupy Gaza again and to put his forces on Gaza.
We're now joined by Mr. Omar Al-Ghoul, PLO Central Council member from Ramallah. Good morning to you, sir, and welcome to Q News, to In Depth. And let me here ask you, how would this escalation reflect on the political landscape and the prospects for any future negotiations?
Once again, good morning to you and to your dear viewers. Certainly, what happened at the dome of the past Tuesday that led the martyrdom and the casualties of around 1,000 Palestinian people is some sort of an upending the agreement of Doha and exposing the intentions of Netanyahu's government around turning the back of the agreement of Doha and against all the talks and negotiations and what has been agreed upon during the past days and weeks. And this is a result that there is a decision basically by Netanyahu for not to move forward and implement any agreement, and it was some odd for the politician that and the Netanyahu and his government isn't in favor of the agreement, but for only a specific moment, President Trump wanted to make some sort of a breakthrough or achievement even before taken into office, and following that consulted Witkoff and succeeded to achieve the three-phase truce agreement based on the mechanism of the exchange release of prisoners and captives. But before the end of the first phase, Netanyahu started to evade, and once, or rather, following the resignation of Galevi, the chief of staff, and bringing the new chief of staff, Eli Zamir, taking a decision by the mission of Bistrich to open the front of genocide against the Palestinian people, and even Hamas movement and its leaders. On the statement of Khalil al-Hayyi, the head of the political office of Gaza Strip had agreed upon to release the 4 bodies and 6 alive prisoners. Supposedly, Israeli prisoners should be released today, and on Saturday the live prisoners should be released. But the Israeli cabinet, presided by Netanyahu, is resuming the war and returned Ben Gvir to his previous position, despite his resignation 2 months ago. And as everybody knows, the goals are firstly to protect his position in the government along with his governing coalition as it is, and not to allow any displacement, and to the adoption of the Israeli budget, as Netanyahu is facing difficulties of the voting on the budget, and therefore, along with the return of Ben Gvir, the leader of the Jewish power, he guaranteed to go out of the crisis, and that might have led to early elections, and also to manipulate the Israeli people and the deep government. And he's announced on X that he's confronted on the old government in line with President Donald Trump, equal as both of them confronting the same thing as mentioned, and to manipulate about the families of the hostages and giving up their lives, as since the beginning Netanyahu and Smotrich and Ben Gvir were saying clearly that the victims will be, or rather the hostages will be considered as part of the victims. So they pay no attention nor concern with respect to Netanyahu. Netanyahu wants to pass the process of the full code on the deep government of the Israeli government, and things wasn't only enough for Ben Bar or reside in Be'eri, or will go to David Beria, the chief of Mossad, and as well as, or rather others of the main pillars of the deep government, as announced, as I mentioned clearly, also to convince the whole world that the Hamas movement and the Palestinian side are those who are responsible of this, what happened. And the truth is the other way, and on the contrary, Hamas were very committed to the agreement.
Indeed. Mr. Ghul, let me here take it to Ms. Natasha, but you really pinpointed your finger on very important points that we'll get back to it. Ms. Natasha, let me here ask you about your opinion about the response of the international communities towards the new violence and aggression by Israel, and what do you think the U.S. reaction has been so far?
Actually, if we are talking about the international community, it seems after more than 500 days of these attacks on Gaza, that they didn't have a real will to stop Israel or to put any pressure on Israel to stop this escalation on Gaza Strip and um, these war, but they maybe change their mind to have some statements against what is happening, not anything more than that. For the United States, they are fully supporting Israel in any action they are taking, and they said that in public, and that means they want to reach an agreement and to ceasefire and the ceasefire in Gaza, but still how to reach that is the question, because in Trump opinion they can use all the path to reach this agreement, including the escalations and the attacks on Gaza, what is happening now. They said that these escalations on Gaza now and these attacks is not for ending the opportunity of any or any chance or opportunity of reaching an agreement, but it's for reaching the agreement as soon as possible. So they are using these fires to put pressure on Hamas and on the Palestinian side to accept what it's not acceptable in their point of view, and to shrink the gap between the two parties, the Palestinian parties and the Israeli parties, not by putting any pressure on Israel, but in putting a lot of pressure on the Palestinian side by killing more and more Palestinians, as if
But
that
I'm asking you here, I asked you here, Ms. Nacha, about the response of the international community toward the aggression, particularly the U.S., which was part of the mediation of this ceasefire agreement. So how do you view their reaction so far, what they did, their action towards the ongoing violations to Israel's or to the international law by the Israeli side?
Unfortunately, the United States is taking the side of Israel completely, and they supporting the Israeli action. Yes, they are responsible of putting pressure maybe in the two parties, the Palestinian and the Israeli parties, to reach for an agreement. But what they are doing now, and it's clear that they will give Israel the green light to do whatever they want to reach this agreement in a very comfortable way for the Israelis. And this is including killing more and more Palestinians. What the United States supposed to do is to stop these fires and these attacks and to reach maybe peacefully for an agreement, but they are not taking any action toward that. Even the one the one time that they tried to reach for an agreement in direct negotiation with Hamas, Israel put an rejection in these actions. So they stopped the negotiation, the direct negotiation with Hamas, because Israel is not willing and not comfortable with this path. So even if they try to examine any other path, instead of attacks on Gaza and putting pressure in Hamas, the Israel will reject this option, and the United States will accept the Israeli rejection. So I didn't think that the United States have independent against what is the Israeli will in this case. So talking about the United States role as a huge state or as an international or external part is not really a real situation. The real situation that the United States is fully supporting Israel, and they are in partnership in what is happening in Gaza now. And the other people, the other players in the international community is just watching what is happening without taking any action, and they didn't really has a real will to stand against the United States and Israel and take a real action against what is happening.
Getting back to you, Mr. Ghuland, you spoke about very important points and reports that were really made during the past period. The changes that were made in the Israeli army, particularly the chief of staff and the Shabak that we've seen. Also, we've seen the return, as you said, respectively here, the return of Itamar Ben-Gvir, who was one of the a minister of the most radical Israeli government that has been seen in the history of Israel, maybe. We've also seen that the Israeli opposition, plus the streets in Israel, or the public opinion in Israel, not very much welcoming the return of such escalation. From your point of view, what's your take on that? How do you think that will reflect on the Israelis' ongoing violations and the upcoming steps?
I would like to reaffirm that what's happening in the Israeli street and the escalation of contradictions between the Israeli component along with the coalition government, that is about or working upon a change in the deep government would certainly this would have a great impact in deepen the crisis and the internal contradictions in the Israeli street, and reflect the state of failure within Israel as it is in the first time since its establishment 77 years ago. This contradiction is emerged between the governing regime and the pillars of the deepened state, and therefore it would have a great effect as stated by the chief of opposition, by calling upon the Israeli community strongly to pressure to out this government, as said by several opposition leaders and a part of their coalitions, as well as judges, that this government that is posing a great threat that...
I beg your pardon, Mr. Ghul, I need a brief answer because we're out of time. So briefly, what's your last words?
Has benefited at a larger scale by the presence of Trump's administration that moved from the position of a mediator to a partner and a leader that even directed the steer of the war, and even Trump did not announce or other, he announced that he would direct the hell to the Palestinian people.
Right.
So the court or the ball at the Trump's court to discipline the Israeli leadership.
Indeed. Indeed, the ball is in the big powers' hands, particularly the US, which is which is the main sponsor and the main mediator. We thank you both, Ms. Ratiba El Nacha, a member of the Palestinian Action Committee, and Mr. Omar Al Ghul, a PLO Central Council member. We thank you both for your insights, and I guess that brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.